You get a car that's cheaper to buy, cheaper to run, more fun to drive. You tell me who's going to win.
It's not just manufacturing. It's a whole ecosystem has to work. The industry, the government, also the society has to accept. This is really the environment to grow EV, I think.
Market regime will change, regulatory will change. We don't know what the regime will look in France in 5 years. We don't even know what Germany and tomorrow in the United States will do. So, but the fundamentals are right.
If you were out and about today, it's pretty likely that you saw an EV, either on the road using some public charging infrastructure. And the reason is that the EV industry and EV uptake is accelerating at a dramatic pace. I think sometimes in the West, we see headlines in general media that talks about EV uptake being slow or uneven or not meeting expectations. But when you take a global perspective, EVs are absolutely flying away with market share, driving away with market share, rather. And that made the discussion today of the role of electric mobility, batteries, and energy resilience and our renewable energy transition so important. My guests today were Adele Zhao from Trina Solar, one of the giants of the Chinese solar industry that's moved very aggressively into battery energy storage. And there's really no discussion of e-mobility without discussing China. She was joined by Thomas Raffaner, the founder and CEO of the Mobility House, who founded the company in 2009, which was really very prescient, seeing the potential of e-mobility and also charging infrastructure. They were both joined by Jared Reed, who is an investor and analyst and also podcaster, and was a banking analyst charting the clean energy industries for many years. And as Jared said, there are many ways that the EV revolution is playing out that doesn't fit the conventional mold of industry and technological change, which makes it very difficult for some people to understand, particularly incumbent industries. My name's Jonathan Gifford, and this is a special series of the Smartery podcast. And in this episode of Powering Through the Resilience of Renewables here at the Smartery 2025, we're addressing e-mobility, vehicle-to-grid, vehicle-to-home, and the role that these different approaches and technologies, along with battery energy storage systems, can play in delivering a more resilient electricity network. My guests today are Adele Zhao. She's the head of marketing, product solution, and customer service Europe for Trina Solar. Thomas Raffaner. He's the founder and CEO of the Mobility House, and Jared Reed is a consultant and investor and the host of the Redefining Energy podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. When we're talking e-mobility, it really is an area that is accelerating quite quickly, although it hasn't been linear, you have to say. And there's also a lot of kind of chicken and egg dynamics going on in terms of charging infrastructure and also the cars themselves. If we're talking about demand, how do you assess the market, Thomas, having been engaged in this space for quite some time?
I have to smile when you say linear. It was a roller coaster. It's also a line, but it really went up and down. And I remember the first show here was 2007, the Intersolar, and we were at the end of one booth, and there was maybe half a hall, and there was nobody because nobody believed in electric cars. Now, I have to say, if you look around, there are electric cars, for some too many, for some too little, and there are fortunately tons of renewables. And now is the time to bring this thing together. And fortunately, we've been in Berlin yesterday. People see now electric cars as part of the solution and not part of the problem. I think this is really the major mind shift that has been done. And fortunately, we have a government now in Germany, and fortunately, they see what we do. And fortunately, now I think this can start. And this will be a line in the future, I'm sure, and it will be very steep.
Well, I think when you're talking about a concern, there was a real narrative around, if we plug all these EVs into the grid at the same time, we're going to crash the network.
Exactly.
Is that right? Yeah.
And I mean, if you don't do it intelligently, if you don't do it right, it will collapse. We have seen that in Spain. We have seen that in many incidents. If you do it right, the cars can help to stabilize the grid. If you get it wrong, it might cause a problem. But if you do it right, this will be the biggest flexibility that we have. Even today, we have 1.5 million cars. that equal 15 nuclear power stations. That's a lot to stabilize the grid. And they're here, they're connected, so you can do a lot with it.
You speak positively about the framework conditions that are in Germany at the moment, or encouragingly, but we really can't talk about e-mobility without talking about China. Adele, Zhao, it's great to have your perspective here on this podcast as well. How would you describe kind of EV uptake in China at the moment?
Yeah. So I actually checked some number, quite interesting. I'm pretty sure many of you already know, but I will be also to highlight. It's very interesting. I'll go to the battery. How much actually were shipped last year in China, of course, to the global. So in total is 1,175 gigawatt hour. So the battery as a whole, everything. Of course, there are many segments on it. Of course, again, EV is the leading one. And out of that, it's 780 is for EV. And so it's a quite amazing number. And then the second is already also energy storage, right? But EV alone is really, really impressive. I'm from China. I just told Jonathan, I just went back to China during Chinese New Year. The EV just so impressive, the car, not just the price, everything inside. It's really impressive, right? So globally, we sold, so every country we sold about 180 million actually car EV last year, and also so it's about 24.4% growth globally. But China alone, we sold 12 million cars alone. So actually, a lot of my friends are driving EV. So for like mid-class family, they can all afford it. It's really like something for everyone almost. So that's really impressive, and also the infrastructure is also there. So that's very, very great, I think, movement on the EV side in China.
Thomas, I see you were nodding. This sounds more like in China, more like an EV revolution than the kind of evolution of the market.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. Last week on the Shanghai Motor Show, you've seen impressively how if I say that, this is a compliment to you, how the Chinese took over. The cars are simply better, they are cheaper, they have more range. If you look at the technological improvements on the battery, BYD, CATL announced the new Natrium battery, half the price, 1,000 kilometers range, 400 miles charge in 5 minutes. That's a fueling event. So it's really impressive. And yes, this industry is dominated by the Chinese manufacturers. Fortunately, I should say, this is already a technology that can be rolled out to different markets, and let's see how the other markets will pick it up. But we will see a lot of Chinese cars in Europe and also in the United States, I guess. So this industry is really, 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 the technology is there and it's really picked up.
Okay, well,
thanks to the Chinese.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there'll be so many EVs in the US under the current tariff regime, but let's see how that plays out. Jared, I've seen you speak before about some of the performance, when it comes to quality and the range that the Chinese manufacturers are delivering with their EVs. We're in the south of Germany now, which has long been the home of prestige automakers, BMW or Audi, these kind of names famous all over the world, Mercedes. What do you see in terms of the auto industry, the impact of this revolution towards EVs driven by China?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say as I drive a car from BMW, which is obviously headquartered in Germany, but it's made in China. So my electric car is made in China. So what I want to say is that the German manufacturers realize what's coming their way, right? If you go and look at Mercedes, Daimler, biggest investors, Chinese, right? So the writing's on the wall. The question is, what do they do going forward? They have to cooperate with the Chinese, right? There's no way around this. The reality is the scale that China companies have, whether it's in the battery space, the power electronics space, the drive space, even BYD as a car company itself, the speed that it's able to take to develop cars and bring them out, cooperation is the way going forward. And if you don't cooperate, you die. And the reason you're going to die is because it has been for the last 10 years, the EVs has all been about cost of ownership. It's cheaper to power the car than, use diesel or petrol. Well, today in China, it's cheaper to buy an electric car than an internal combustion engine car. Now, it's not the case in Europe, but the writing's on the wall. And so, you got a car that's cheaper to buy, cheaper to run, more fun to drive. You tell me who's going to win.
And what about for implications then for this industry, right? The trade shows outside, the trade show halls outside here at the Smartery, it's all about electrons. So this is going to be a lot of demand coming onto the network, just demand for energy that's going to be hopefully produced from clean sources. What are some of the implications, Jared, that you see there?
I think first and foremost is that regulators and legislators need to realize that we're in a revolution and you need to embrace the revolution. And one point I give is Thomas now, for example, has been rightly so promoting using electric cars as resources in the grid for a decade. We've only recently got in the regulations to allow this to happen. So you can look at EVs as, it's a pain. What'll happen when we all charge at the same time? The grid's going to collapse. And you go, well, sorry, why don't we begin to use that intelligently, charge you intelligently, and why don't you use it, maybe back up your power in your home, and you use it as a resource? It requires regulatory change to enable that. So I look and, the only thing that concerns me in this revolution we're going through is I really would love to see the invention of an intelligent regulator, to be honest.
Yeah, impossible. Thomas, where are we at then in terms of things like vehicle to grid, vehicle to home in Germany and perhaps in Europe more generally?
The technology is there. So a battery is made to charge and uncharge. So it's by nature, it's there. So it's not a big deal to charge it and uncharge it. So indeed, what is missing, particularly in Germany, is the regulatory framework. Unfortunately, I should say, Germany is leading, but from the bottom, the penetration of smart meters. So we have 3% out of 100. That's I think there is only North Korea and some other countries behind. So the rest, really, including Jordania and Italy, has more. So we need obviously to measure, have a smart meter, and the regulatory framework. That is missing in Germany. In the rest of Europe, not so much. Netherlands is great. We do it in France. England is really the lead here. So in all the countries we can do it, even in the US. So it will come, I have no doubt, because as you said, it will be very cheap to drive an electric car, actually down to zero, if you use it rightly. And just to give you a number on the batteries, if 100% of the cars would turn into electric cars, we would only use 6% more power. So it's not a lot. So it's not that we would then have to build, 100,000 new power stations. The power is there. And actually, with the existing renewable power plants that we have in Germany, it is not the sunniest place on planet Earth, sun and wind, this would be good enough to power and to fuel all the electric cars today. So it's possible.
Well, and also adding all that energy storage capacity to the grid also has the opportunity to reduce curtailment, right? Because we're throwing away wind and solar power at the moment.
We assume that the power price will drop from average 222 euros per megawatt hour down to 70. So it will be 60% less. And it will be very hard then to make money on just selling kilowatt hours. And I think the business models for all utilities, you might see this similar. The business model will be different. So selling kilowatt hours will not be a business model. So you have to be more intelligent tariffs, more intelligent offerings to your end user, including the flexibility of electric cars at your home and at work.
Okay, and if we go back to China again, Adele, to bring you in, there's we want the e-mobility revolution to be fueled with renewable resources. And we see that in China, installing a huge amount of solar energy every year. These are seen to go together. Do you feel in China and by policymakers, these solar energy, renewable energy and e-mobility? Do you think it's considered as a one?
Definitely. Because there's so many supporting scheme to support EV. And that's why it moves so fast, right? The infrastructure is essential, right? All the charging stations, and then also the incentive for buying a car, like you can exchange a car, right? So it give you your old car, and then you get an electrical car. It's essential. And then of course at the wider scale, the national grid has to be really robust, and also the regional grid, that's essential. And I think you all know what's going on in China on the solar. So China is too big, right? So where can we put solar? We cannot put in Shanghai. It doesn't make sense, right? It's just too many people, too many buildings. So mostly of them are in the West China, where it's Gobi and nobody lives here. And then the essential is to how to bring this energy back to the highly populated region. I think many countries are a bit similar. So the infrastructure has to be there. It's very important. And also back to the EV part, it's very interesting. Also, Thomas, what you're doing. So like China now is doing lots of tests. Like in my city, Zhao, where Trina is headquartered, we're doing a test now to do the V2G at the moment. So it's also a national kind of government is pushing, say, hey, let's try. And Shanghai also have, there are many cities, like we try a different model and see which one works. So it's not just manufacturing, it's a whole ecosystem has to work. The industry, the government, also the society has to accept. This is really the environment to grow EV, I think. It's very important.
Okay. Well, the batteries are a key part as well, and that is manufacturing. And as Thomas said, these companies like BYD, CATL, really leading the way, and also developing storage along with EVs. Right? They go hand in hand. Trina as a company is going kind of hand in hand, solar and energy storage. Again, how similar is supplying energy storage systems and building storage coming from a solar background and having scaled solar cell and module making?
Yeah, it's still in the same industry, right? But a bit different because storage is really a project business. Every customer has different needs, so we really have to customize the solution. And also, as you well know, like in Europe, the first market was UK. Still today is the leading. So, and then now Germany is also growing, Italy and Spain, but actually they all have different business model, like revenue stream. So actually we have to really design together also the software part, right? Also every grid has different regulation. So it's really a lot of work together to be done with the local partner. So it's also not just the storage, the container itself, but really doing the engineering together with the local partner to understand their need, their revenue stream, and then to make it work. I think that's the key difference from a storage business to a module business. But we know why Trina did that. Because we know Renewable have this issue, we need storage. We cannot, especially when the penetration rate goes higher and higher, we need flexibility and on the grid. It can be on the generation side, which we do a lot, but also on the transmission line and also on the consumption side. For example, for EV charging station, right? Why don't we put also storage to reduce the peak load, because also save a lot of cost. So there are a lot of things we can do together. That's why Trina also moved to do actually a long time before we launch our product, because Mr. Gao, our CEO, no, we will need it, right? So we are now even launching the third generation. And the cell itself is, our direction is make it more energy density, more affordable, but also the key is really integration in the system level at each country, each customer to customize it.
I mean, regulatory, yes, you're absolutely right. If you only look at Germany, there are 800 small utilities. Everybody has his own rules. But I'm not worried about that. This will change. The fundamentals are globally the same. We have renewables. Fortunately, we have wind and solar. And they come with volatility. So, and the answer to volatility, it's all about solar and storage. So the volatility needs flexibility and needs a storage. Every other kilowatt hour that is produced somewhere on this planet need to be stored wherever. So market regime will change, regulatory will change. We don't know what the regime will look in France in 5 years. We don't even know what Germany and tomorrow in the United States will do. So, but the fundamentals are right. We need storage, and here batteries can help. So that's why I'm super relaxed actually that batteries will take over, because they're the cheapest form, and also cars are the cheapest form of flexibility that we have. Use it. And then we have to adjust with regulatory frameworks. Sometimes people say you're such a fan of China, but yes, they are the role model for me, for not just renewables, for climate change. Not because they want to save the planet necessarily, but it's simply the cheapest way to do it. There is nothing cheaper than a solar power station or a wind today. You can't compete with any gas-fired power station. So it's obviously renewables. You know that better. 520 gigawatts have been installed last year in power generation. 400 out of them were renewable and 380 out of them in China. They drive it because it's cheaper. It's economically cheaper to produce power with solar, and it's economically cheaper to use batteries to store it. That's why the fundamentals are going in the right direction. And different markets will have different regulatory regimes. This will depend on governments. They will change, but the fundamentals will not disappear.
Well, Jared, I remember the first time we were kind of ever in touch was you were a banking analyst, like looking at these exciting solar stocks as they would come onto the market. How similar do you see the progress of batteries to the progress of solar in the past? Because the progress of solar, the cost reduction has been amazing. The efficiency gains have been amazing, but there's also been a lot of pitfalls along the way, a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of kind of market uncertainty. Are there those potential barriers to storage growth and EV growth as well?
So the industry is slightly different. The reason it's slightly different is because what we had was a solar industry that started in Germany and then went to China, and German industry was wiped out. As you know, there was a whole pile of solar companies in China wiped out. We didn't have that in storage. And the reason we didn't have it is because what we had was the Japanese and the South Koreans, basically 3 companies, Panasonic, LG, Samsung, they're still in the game. And then what you had was CATL and BYD. And these guys still, even though it's going from South Korea and Japan towards Japan in terms of market share, we still have the industry dominated by, 6 or 7 players. Now, so they've gone into what I'll call an oligopoly very early. The solar industry is already in an oligopoly, right? There is 5 or 6 global players and they dominate, right? So that's why they're very similar today. Now, if I look at this as put my analyst hat on, you had it. Do I bet against the Chinese? No. If I look in the battery space, no way, because they have the scale. Once you get to that scale, I think I heard that number, which was that there's 40 billion lithium-ion cells produced last year, billion, and in solar cells, it's sort of 5 billion or something. The scale is enormous, and this is very, very important. This is part of the revolution that we're in. Going back to what Thomas said, is people do not realize that we have never seen a generation technology get to market as quickly as solar because it's small and can be flexible. The battery's the same thing. All of us are carrying lithium-ion batteries in our pockets, and you can use them to power a town, right? It's these 2 technologies together sort of change the energy landscape globally, and I'd say forever. And we need to embrace it. And actually, I take what Thomas has said, is we have to look at China as the role model, because China took a very strategic view on these technologies, if I may say, which is that we need to dominate the production and also the execution of these technologies, the implementation of them into the system. While in Europe, we sort of started along the path and then have sort of backed away because we're afraid, because we've got incumbent industries and whatever that are blocking change, and governments are scared of job losses, right? But if we don't do something, there's even worse, right?
Do you think there's a risk to it from trade disputes? We've seen these crazy tariffs.
Yeah.
It's essentially an embargo in the US. And then, things like friendshoring, it's a terrible word, but, this kind of push towards localism rather than international.
So I'm going to say as an economist, right? I go, you do not win tariff wars. If you have to put tariffs on somebody, what you do is you're admitting that your own industry is not competitive. That's what you're saying. And then you have to ask the question, well, how do you get competitive? You don't get competitive by making the alternative more expensive, because what you do is you spoil your own industry and don't force them to be competitive. So you have to really rethink the strategy in and around industry. So I would say from a European perspective, if I'm talking about climate and energy, we have to really bring industry policy together with energy policy. China have done that. That's what we have to learn from China. And I actually say the only way you're going to compete with China is how they compete with us, Paul. Where does CATL come from? It came from ATL. It was a Japanese battery business, joint venture with the Japanese, and then CATL is a spill out from it, and the rest is history. We have to do the same. We have to admit that we have a huge amount to learn from China. huge amount, and we need to integrate with them. And if we don't integrate with them, then you can forget the automobile industry, for example.
Yeah, so partnerships really a promising way to both move forward the
Yeah,
transition
of course.
and also to support industry.
So if US decide they're going to go down the road of tariffs, I just say I hope we don't do the same, because it is economic suicide.
Thomas, you seem to be agreeing.
I absolutely agree. It's. I think I'm not. I think I'm relaxed on that, because we already saw that there was import tax on mobile phones. There was an import tax on cars. The next morning it was gone, because the Americans wouldn't have a mobile phone. It's very simple. So they say, hey, we need this stuff. So let's make an exemption here. Let's make an exemption there. Is this irritating? Yes. Does this make sense? No. Are we fed of hearing all that news every day? Yes. But at the end of the day, there is no alternative to being competitive and having the best technology at the best price. And you're absolutely right. If you look at China today, we have a cluster there around batteries and electric cars, and also solar system that is unbeatable. So I think the last week in China, this was a great statement from the Volkswagen CEO of China. He said, "We build cars for China in China, and we will build cars for the United States, probably more with more value-added services in the US. But at the end of the day, the speed and the learning needs to come from the best practice. And in the electrical car industry, it's China. So we should go there, and we are now they are the teacher, we are the kids. So we should learn from them how to produce cars faster and better. And there might be other industries where they can learn from us. And I don't see that this will disappear. Fundamentally, again, here, Americans will probably look at industries that they can, like artificial intelligence, they're strong there. So they might want to think about stuff to export that. On electric cars, they will work with China and they will work with Europe.
Okay, well, to round out this conversation, a quick final thought from each of you. This kind of intersection between renewables, solar, energy storage, and e-mobility, kind of what's the most exciting part, or what is a key takeaway you want to leave the viewer with? Adele, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing combination, because solar plus storage together, and also EV, we are actually decarbonizing two most polluting industry in the world. Number one is the energy itself. So with solar itself, it's decarbonizing, replacing the fossil fuel. With the EV together, and that's where decarbonizing the transport industry, which is another biggest polluter in the world. So we have to go in hand, and then we can change the whole world, make the whole world cleaning. On top of that, like Thomas said, I said perfectly, so what he's doing, I think is amazing, right? Then, for example, Trina is putting on the stationary storage onto the grid, on the big one, and the EV. And then it's like a mobile power bank everywhere, very decentralized, right? Everyone can do it and do some contribution, give back to the society, like the blackout in Spain. We are all have to do something with the mobility. We are able to do it, do something, give back to the grid. Why not? I think it's amazing. And then big company can participate. But if I have an EV car, I can do it too. Why not? So it's a brilliant idea, I think, to putting everything together and make the change. Like into solar itself, right? Like you said, 2007, half the horn today, look at around. It's really impressive. We are already here, and we have to push further and quicker and change the world. All the political disruption, but our industry, we're together. We keep fighting together and push. And people have to listen to the politician. And nobody can stop us. I'm a strong believer in this. Let's do it together.
A powerful message, Thomas.
Nothing to add. Thank you very, very much. It's obvious. It's so obvious, Gerald, why it took 15 years for people to understand. But it's obvious. It's there. Just do it.
Okay, and the technology is there now.
It's there.
Yeah.
Yes. And regulatory are always late. So just like anti-dopers, the doping industry is always faster than dopers. So but they will follow.
Jared?
I think the thing that I would add is, I know Thomas quite a while, so we're what I would describe as non-linear thinkers. And the issue I would say as a European is that our leaders are all linear thinkers. And we're now living in a non-linear world where it's very difficult. You can't get McKinsey to just tell you what's going to happen because they're going to be wrong. And we've lived in this linear world, if I may say, since German reunification. And that would be my concern as a European, is that we need more Thomases in leadership positions that actually, think innovatively and get things done quickly. And that's what you do in China.
We do it together.
I
like that. Well said.
I think that's a great place
China
to
cannot do
end
it alone also.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Jared Reed, Thomas Ruffiner, Adele Zhao, thank you for joining the Powering Through podcast here at the Smartery 2025. My name is Jonathan Gifford, the head of content for Climate Copy, and thank you for watching.